Welcome! In this video I'm going to be sharing about the different types of stone setting that we use in jewellery making and just describing a bit about each different one. They're all different skills you can learn. Some of them are easier to learn than others and yeah, we're going to take a little look. So first up is the cabochon setting. Sometimes this is called a rub over setting, and this is normally the first stone setting skill that a jeweller will learn. And we use a cabochon stone, which is a stone with a flat back and a curve on the top, and we create a wall all the way around it in metal, and then we rub it over, which is why it's sometimes called a rub over setting. And these are really beautiful settings. They're used a lot in jewellery making. They're great for setting all sizes of stone, but particularly slightly larger ones. You can set round stones, oval stones, square stones, irregular shape, any shape you can imagine in this way, and it creates really beautiful effects. So there's so much you can do just with this setting alone. The next setting that I really like, which is kind of often the next one that you learn, is a tube setting. So this is also not a particularly difficult setting to learn to do, and it's as it sounds, it's in a tube. So you have a tube and you have your stone sat in the middle, and then you rub just the ends of the tube over it. So again, you could call this a rub over as well, but the difference is we normally start from a tube, so that it's normally smaller, and a cabochon tends to be a larger or more irregular shape. And for tube setting, you don't need a flat back stone. You can do it with a flat back stone, but it tends to be a faceted stone, so a stone with a point at the bottom, like a diamond shape cubic zirconia or a fancy cut gemstone. But tubes are round, so it has to be a round stone, unless you have a square tube or other shapes of tube, but you are more restricted, generally speaking, by the shape in a tube setting. Tube settings are really nice as additions. I love putting them next to cabochons or just on pieces. Just a really lovely way to add a bit of sparkle to a piece that you're making. So next up is the flush setting. So this is a setting, again, of a faceted stone, and it tends to be on a flat piece of metal, whether it's a pendant or a ring or whatever, and the stone sits just on the surface. So it's flush with the metal. So that is a flush setting. It used to be called a gypsy setting, and it's the same thing. And essentially we drill out some space, create a setting, and push the metal over just gently around the edge. So that is often the third setting that people learn, but not always. And I know when we teach classes at the London Jewellery School, we have a stone setting course that covers all those three settings. So we tend to do cabochon, tube, and flush all together. So they're all kind of beginner to intermediate stone setting skills that you can learn, and you can fairly simply develop the skills to be able to do all of those at home by yourself. And for those of you miles away, we also have this course online. So it's called Stone Setting in Silver, and it's inside the Jewellers Academy website. So if you're looking to learn stone setting, then that's a brilliant place to get started. The next setting that people often move on to is called a collet setting. And a collet setting is essentially, it's a bit like a tube setting, but instead of being a round tube, it's tapered. So it tends to be more kind of V shape, if you like, to put into rings. You can do collets in circle, in pear, in square, in pretty much any shape, to be honest. And sometimes we use something called a collet block to create that setting. So it doesn't have to be, but it tends to have a thicker wall than a basic bezel setting. And yeah, it just kind of has a slightly different shape to it at the bottom, at least most of the time. All of these can have variations, so it kind of depends. But a collet is a really nice setting to put a really lovely setting all the way around a gemstone, where you can see the metal go all the way around. And you can edit a collet to make something called a crown, or you can take some sections out of the collet to give a different kind of shape and feel to it. So a crown setting is a little bit like a collet, starts like a collet, but it's not all the way around metal. It has some gaps in it which tend to look a little bit like a crown shape. Another setting which most people will be familiar with is a claw setting. These are sometimes called basket settings. So this is where you have your stone, and it's normally a faceted stone, and you have claws that kind of go around it. And you can have all different claws or baskets. So there can be a 4-claw setting, a 6-claw, 8-claw. They tend to be kind of the common ones. Obviously you can have any number of claws. And you can have a double gallery, which means like 2 layers around the bottom, or a single one. All different things. And again, these can be for circle stones, for marquise, any shape stone, fancy cuts, all of the above. They don't tend to be used on cabochons though. So normally something with a point at the bottom, fancy cut stone, which is how the gemstone really sparkles. So claw setting is a wonderful one to learn. It's another one that we teach online, as well as collet setting. So we have classes for all of these ones so far available, but they're also just good to learn about and know of in your jewelry making, so that you've got different opportunities. And if you're not at the stage yet where you'd be ready to do any of these settings, you can sometimes buy the actual setting and get a stone setter to set it. So don't feel restricted in your making just because your skills aren't there yet. You can work on your skills and outsource to get some support in the areas that you're not ready for just yet. So there's always possibilities with these stone settings. So next up is the channel setting. Channel settings are used a lot on men's rings, or kind of like quite traditional work. So it's where you carve a channel out of 2 bits of metal and you pop the setting in there. So it's a really lovely setting. It looks very classic in my opinion. It can also look quite modern if it's done in certain ways. This is quite a challenging setting if you're new to stone setting, so I say this is more advanced. The claw is also a little bit more advanced to make from scratch, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. We do have a channel setting course as well, and it just comes down to really working quite small and in detail, and practice. With all these settings, it's about practice makes perfect. Then we have the star setting. So a star setting is a version of setting that we use gravers to create. So we're essentially carving some of the metal, graving some of the metal up and over the stone to set it in place. And star settings are really beautiful. Again, something that needs practicing, but definitely something that can be learned and can be achieved. And this is something that we hope to build a course on. I definitely want us to do one on these. We don't have one just yet, but it's a beautiful setting. So I think a really nice one to add to your repertoire if and when you can. Then a couple of more advanced settings, which stone setters tend to do for jewelers, but some jewelers do develop those skills and learn how to do them themselves, is pave setting and also grain setting. So pave setting is where we set gemstones right next to each other, often very, very small and very close. So when you see that beautiful jewelry that just is covered in diamonds or rubies or emeralds and they're all kind of next to each other, that's most likely going to be a pave or potentially a grain setting. So they are much more intricate. They require much more intricate tool usage, often being able to see extremely well through the magnifiers as well. But if you are more advanced and you're looking to really develop your skills as a stone setter, then there's some really nice techniques to try out. And I think every jeweler should try a technique once, even if they know they're going to send it to a stone setter and it's not going to be for them. It's just so useful to have the knowledge of how something is done and, you know, what it looks like. And even when you're instructing someone else to do it, it's useful that you understand how the process works. So we have some courses on those at the London Jewellery School, and we do private tuition on those. Again, not one we have online just yet, but perhaps something for the future if you guys want to learn it. So there's some more advanced settings for those of you that are looking to challenge yourself and try new things. The other setting that I think is worth mentioning is how we set stones in wax, because wax can be an amazing tool for stone setting. So if you're carving pieces out of wax anyway, this is a technique that jewelers use to create rings, pendants, earrings, whatever, using a different technique. So we carve it out of wax, then we get it cast, and it's cast into a particular metal, a silver, a gold, a bronze, whatever you like. So you can actually set pieces in wax either by firing them in place. So you actually keep the stones in the wax and get it fired at the casters. Casting them in place, sorry. Get them cast at the casters with the stones in place, and this can work for diamonds and sapphires and rubies, some very hard stones on the Mohs scale. And but there's some risk there. It doesn't always work. So that's kind of a fun thing to play with if you've got some of those kind of gemstones that you're happy to experiment with. You can also create settings in wax, pretty much all of the above that we've talked about in different ways, but creating them in wax instead. getting the piece cast, and then setting them afterwards. So it's worth considering whether wax carving is a better technique for you if you are working on a piece and you're not quite sure what stone setting to use. It's worth having that in your repertoire as well. Another type of setting that I think is worth mentioning, because it's quite popular at the moment, is essentially a bezel setting but using a hammering technique. So we use a hammer to push the bezel over, a much thicker bezel, and it often creates a texture in the bezel as well. So that's been something that's been coming up more and more in the community and in the industry. And essentially there's different ways you can do it, but you use a hammer and a setting tool and you hammer around very carefully, of course, making sure you're supporting your work. Or the other way is to use a hammer piece on a pendant motor or a flex shaft. If all of that sounds like another language to you, don't worry. I just wanted to give you guys a quick run through of the different types of settings, the main different types of settings. And the other one that I haven't mentioned yet is a tension setting. So tension settings are really beautiful because you're essentially using the tension of the metal to hold the piece in place. And they're often quite simple settings in terms of you have the stone in the middle. I'm thinking of a fancy cut, but it could be all different kinds. And then if it's a ring, the metal comes around either side and just basically holds it in place from that tension. So another beautiful type of setting to learn. So come and let me know, did I miss any out? Are there any other settings that I haven't mentioned? There are so many, but they're some of my favorite ones that I like to use a lot. To be honest, I use cabochon setting so much. I also love claw setting and collet and tube, and that's the main body of my personal work that I use. But I would love to hear about your favorite settings, any new ones that you'd like to learn, or any that I haven't mentioned. Please come and share with everyone below, because I know it can be hard when we're starting out in jewelry making and it's like a new language and we don't know where to start or what we're doing, and every teacher calls things slightly different. So it's always just good to share the knowledge and to learn from each other. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you. I'll pop the links to some of the lessons that I mentioned below if you would like to learn some of the stone setting techniques. And I look forward to seeing your comments and seeing you on another video very soon. Bye for now.